Well, political parties and independent candidates wanting to take part in this year's municipal elections have submitted their lists to the IEC. However, there are already rumblings among some ANC members who are not happy with the party's candidate list. Political analyst and senior research associate at the Institute for Global Dialogue, that's Sanusha Naidu, joins me now to discuss local government election prospects. Sanusha, always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for your time. Now, it seems most political parties have actually met the deadline, but we understand there are actually some that haven't even met the deadline. I think around 74 parties, if my research is correct.
Yeah, it's amazing to see that. I was just looking at the IEC press release, and they say that they have about just under 60,000 candidates that have been put forward for the elections, for the local government elections, whether this year or next year. They have about 74% of that was captured electronically, and around about 26 that were manual submissions. And they have about about under 944 independent candidates, two big parties. And I think we know who the two big parties are that are contesting all 250 municipalities. And you're looking at about, I think it was 10,000, I think the number of seats that we are looking at is 10,478 seats that are going to be contested in this election. So those political parties that didn't make the deadline or haven't necessarily conformed to whatever of the processes were of the IEC, I'm not sure if they will have an extension. I think the whole deposit of payment closed on Monday night. And I think at that point, the IEC noted in its press briefing, it had recorded around about 7 million rand. There'll still be political parties who may have met the deadline, but then with the electronic transfers, it may take a day or two to reflect in their bank account. So at this point in time, I think, it's really quite interesting to see that the process is happening irrespective of what the legal battle is in terms of whether the election is going to happen this year or next year.
Yeah. So, Nisha, should we be worried or be concerned about any potential, political unrest or political, assault or even political killings around this time? Because we know hotly contested elections coming up, that debate still going on whether to keep it for October or even postpone it for next year, Feb.
I think the problem here is that it's an uncertainty, but it's an uncertainty that has relative kinds of dynamics, implications. We do know that what we saw outside Luthuli House, I think there were certain branch members, there were certain groups from particular branch structures that did not necessarily agree with the process in which the ANC had adopted in terms of nominating candidates. There were those that were giving interviews, I think, on this channel last night that were saying that they were on the list and then surprisingly they were not on the list. Now, whether that's widespread, we've got to understand that, and whether or not it's across the board for the ANC, I think it's something that we need to drill down and explore in greater detail. But at the end of the day, I think what is critical here is that people have particular expectations of how are they going to make it onto the list. It's a job. You talked about the unemployment stats just before this interview, and it's a job for many people in the ANC, in terms of local government, to go onto these party lists, and in particular for the ANC to be on the party list to get a job at the municipality or in some capacity. And I think that's going to be critical. I think the violence that essentially surrounds and enshrouds the local government election has been there for a while. I think you have pockets of violence. We do know that KZN has been that hotspot of violence, particularly in the way that it has unfolded with regard to party political lists, candidate lists. But at the same time, I think that we've got to watch this election even more, because some of the impressions I get is that if you're going to start making sure that you deliver a candidate list that is almost, and I'm not saying completely, but is almost based on the idea of standing to the ethical, moral compass of what we want as bureaucracies or we want as councillors, then of course it raises a different herring of issues. So I think at the end of the day, we can't ignore it. It's there. It's an undercurrent to our local government election, and it has been an undercurrent for a long time.
No, it's something to consider there as well, Sanusha. But that correction I want to make there, it's actually 74 candidates from 4 parties who missed that deadline. But we'll leave it there, Sanusha. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Sanusha Naidu.